The silence in our home wasn't empty. It was full. It was a third presence, a heavy, invisible roommate that had moved in between James and me, settling into the couch cushions and collecting like dust on the mantlepiece dock. It wasn't the angry silence that follows a shouting match, the kind that crackles with static electricity. No, this was softer, heavier. It was the silence of erosion. We had been married for 12 years, and the vibrant, chaotic symphony of our early 20s had slowly faded into a predictable, low-frequency hum. Our conversations had become logistical, functional. Did you pay the insurance premium? What time is Sophie's piano recital? We're out of milk. We were a corporation, not a couple. We were efficient. We were polite. But the live wire that used to connect us, that raw, sparking tether that made the air shimmer when we were in the same room, had rusted through. I need to be fair to James. I need you to understand this before I tell you what I did. James was a good man. In fact, he was a great man. He was a forensic accountant, a man of details, of precision. He was the kind of man who remembered to check the tire pressure on my car before it rained. He was the kind of father who didn't just attend Sophie's recitals, but recorded them, categorized them, and told her exactly which measure she had improved on since last week. But the James, the first, fell in love with the man who once pulled me into a fountain in Rome just to kiss me under the falling water. Is seated. In his place was a quiet, preoccupied creature whose soul seemed to belong to spreadsheets and risk assessments. I felt myself fading. I was becoming transparent. I was James's wife. I was Sophie's mother. But I wasn't Elena anymore. I felt like a satellite orbiting a planet that had forgotten gravity existed. I suppose that's why Julian felt like oxygen. I didn't go hunting for an affair. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to destroy my life. It found me. Julian was a client at the high-end staging firm where I worked. He was a property developer, new money, flashy, ambitious, and possessed of a smile that seemed to have a direct line to my nervous system. We were hired to stage the penthouse of his new skyline project, the Apex. Julian was everything James wasn't. He was chaotic. He was loud. He was spontaneous. When James looked at me, he saw a schedule. When Julian looked at me, he saw a woman. You're wasted on fabric swatches, Elena, he told me during our second meeting, leaning over a blueprint table. You have a vision. You see the soul of a room. It was a line. I knew it was a line. But God help me. I wanted to believe it. It started with the lies we tell ourselves. It's just coffee, I thought. It's just discussing the color palette for the master suite. It's just a business lunch. But the coffee turned into wine. The lunches turned into late dinners. And the conversation shifted from minimalist furniture to our dreams, our fears, our desires. The flutter in my chest when his name appeared on my phone screen was a drug I hadn't tasted in a decade. I was addicted to the dopamine hit of being seen. The first time he touched me, it was intentional. We were on the terrace of the unfinished penthouse. The city grid sprawled out below us like a circuit board. The wind was whipping my hair, and he reached out, tucking a strand behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my jawline. The guilt should have stopped me. It didn't. The thrill was too loud. I became an architect of deception. I built a parallel life, brick by lying brick. I told James the first was working late on the Apex project. I told him clients were demanding. I told him traffic was bad. James never questioned me. Not once. His trust was absolute. It was a fortress I had lived in safely for 12 years, and now I was tunneling under the walls. That trust, which should have made me stop, actually made it easier. His lack of suspicion felt like permission. I told myself he didn't care. I told myself he was too absorbed in his numbers to notice his wife was drifting away. I mistook his silence for blindness. The affair with Julian was a whirlwind of stolen hours in hotel rooms and hushed phone calls from my car. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. I was playing a character, the seductive, mysterious mistress, and all the while, I went home to James, cooked dinner, asked about his day, and slept in his bed. The guilt was a low-grade nausea that lived in my throat, but I learned to swallow it. I was so focused on my own secrets that I almost missed the change in James. It was subtle at first. A tectonic shift deep underground. He started waking up earlier. He joined a high-end gym, something he used to mock his vanity for the insecure. He traded his sensible, boxy suits for tailored Italian cuts that emphasized shoulders I hadn't realized were so broad. He started reading books on architectural theory and modern urban planning, just expanding my horizons. He said when I asked him about the stack of magazines on his nightstand. Stagnation is death, right? He was evolving, but he wasn't evolving toward me. He was building a new version of himself, and I wasn't consulted on the blueprints. I felt a strange, hypocritical pang of jealousy. Who was this man? Why was he suddenly listening to jazz records in the evening? Why was he so vibrant? I told Julian about it. I think he's having a midlife crisis, I laughed, lying in the crook of Julian's arm. Julian chuckled. Let him buy a sports car, babe. Keeps him distracted while we have fun. We were so arrogant. We were children playing with matches in a library. The fear arrived on a rainy Tuesday. James was at the kitchen island, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the knife was the only sound in the room. I was pouring a glass of wine, trying to steady my hands after a text from Julian. By the way, James said, not looking up from the carrots, I met an interesting character today. A developer. My blood went cold. The bottle shook in my hand. Oh, yeah, energetic guy. Big ideas. A bit rough around the edges, but he's got vision. James scraped the vegetables into the pan. The sizzle sounded like a gunshot. Name's Julian. Julian Thorne. The world stopped spinning. I gripped the counter. It had to be a coincidence. It was a common enough name. Really? I choked out. What? What does he do? James finally looked at me. His face was open, calm. His eyes were a placid blue sea. He's building that tower downtown, the Apex. Isn't that the one your firm is staging? He knew. He had to know. I waited for the screaming. I waited for him to throw the knife. I waited for the explosion. Small world, James said, a small smile playing on his lips. I actually bumped into him at a coffee shop near your office. We got to talking. He's looking for a financial partner to help leverage the next phase of construction. I told him I specialize in risk management. He wasn't screaming. He was networking. You're going to work with him? I whispered. I'm thinking about it, James said, turning back to the stove. He seems to think very highly of the design team, specifically the lead stager. He said you have a soul for the room. James quoted Julian's line to me. The line Julian had used to seduce me. He knew everything, and he was doing absolutely nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to James, listening to his steady, rhythmic breathing. Was he asleep? Or was he lying there in the dark, plotting? I tried to break it off with Julian the next day. I met him in a park, hidden behind sunglasses. He knows. Julian, I swear to God, he knows. Julian laughed, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. You're paranoid, Elena. James is a number cruncher. He's a boring actuary. He doesn't have the imagination to suspect us. Besides, he's brilliant with the books. He's going to save me a fortune on tax structuring for the Apex. Let me use him for a bit, then we'll figure it out. Julian didn't see the danger. He saw a useful idiot. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. James didn't just enter Julian's life. He wove himself into the fabric of it. He invited Julian to dinner. "We have to have him over, James said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "He's my new partner. It's only polite." The dinner was a nightmare. I sat at the head of my own table, watching my husband pour wine for my lover. I watched them laugh. I watched James charm Julian, drawing him out, flattering his ego, nodding at his grandiose plans. "You know," James said, slicing into his steak, "Elena often works late on your project. I hope you aren't working her too hard, Julian." James looked at me then. His eyes were dead flat. There was no anger. There was only a terrifying, clinical detachment. He was dissecting me. "She's very dedicated," Julian stammered, actually blushing. "I'm sure she is," James said. Dedication is a rare virtue. Every word was a double-edged razor. James was playing with us. He was the cat, and we were to mice drunk on our own hubris, unaware that the door had been locked. The partnership grew. James invested our life savings into the Apex project. When I found out, I nearly vomited. "James, that's Sophie's college fund. That's our retirement. It's a calculated risk, Elena," he said calmly. "Julian is a rising star. The returns will be astronomical. Don't you trust him?" He trapped me. If I said I didn't trust Julian, I would have to explain why. If I said yes, I was complicit in gambling our future on my affair. "I trust you," I said weakly. "Good," James replied. "Because I've structured the deal so that we're fully committed. We're all in this together now." He was leveraging everything. He was binding Julian to him with chains of gold and paper. Julian was ecstatic. He told me privately that James was a financial wizard who was finding capital where no one else could. "He's doubling the projection cap." Julian crowed. "We're going to be rich, babe. Then I can leave my investors, you can leave the accountant, and we'll take off." I looked at Julian, his arrogance, his blindness, and I felt a cold knot of revulsion. How had I ever found him attractive? He was a child playing checkers against a grandmaster. I tried to warn him again. "James isn't what you think. He's up to something. He's up to making us money, Elena. Relax." The end came 3 months later at the grand opening gala for the Apex. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and sequins. The city's elite were there. The champagne flowed like water. Julian was the king of the night, holding court in the center of the room. Beaming, James stood by the bar, drinking sparkling water. He looked devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He looked calm. He looked like a man who had finished a very long, very difficult puzzle. The speeches began. Julian went up first, thanking the city, the architects, the designers. He pointed to me in the crowd and winked. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Then, Julian introduced James, and now, my partner, the financial genius who made the numbers work, James Sterling. Applause rippled through the room. James walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone. He waited for the silence to settle. He let it hang there, stretching it until the room was breathless. "Thank you, Julian," James said. His voice was warm, rich, and amplified by the speakers. Partnership is a funny thing. It requires absolute transparency. It requires trust. It requires knowing exactly who you are in bed with. A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. I stopped breathing. When I looked at the Apex project, James continued, "I saw potential, but I also saw risk. High risk." He pulled a document from his inside pocket, "which is why, as of 5 p.m. this afternoon, I have executed the exit clause in our partnership agreement." Julian's smile faltered. "James, what are you doing?" James ignored him. He addressed the crowd. "I have officially divested all my shares in the project. However, in doing so, I have triggered the debt covenant transfer." James looked down at Julian, who was now pale as a sheet. "You see, The capital I raised was leveraged against the completion bonds. By exiting now, the full weight of the construction loan's roughly $40 million reverts immediately to the managing partner. Solely. The room went deadly silent. Wait, Julian whispered, the microphone picking up his panic. You can't do that. It's in the contract you signed, Julian, James said pleasantly. Page 42, paragraph C. In the event of a primary investor exit, the managing partner assumes full liability for all outstanding liens. You really should read the fine print. James looked out at the audience. I'd like to wish Julian the best of luck with his creditors. They are a very persistent group. It was a public execution. It was a massacre. James hadn't just left the business. He had timed his exit to bury Julian under a mountain of debt that would bankrupt him for 3 lifetimes. He had destroyed Julian's reputation, his finances, and his future in under 3 minutes. James stepped down from the podium. He walked past Julian, who was trembling, surrounded by confused investors and terrified lawyers. James walked straight to me. He held out his hand. Shall we go, Elena? The ride home was the loudest silence of my life. James drove with one hand on the wheel, relaxed, humming along to the classical station on the radio. The city lights blurred past us streaks of red and gold. You destroyed him, I whispered. I managed the risk, James replied. He was a liability. Now he's been liquidated? And us? I asked, my voice cracking. What about us? James pulled the car into our driveway. The house looked the same as it always did. Warm yellow light spilled from the porch. It looked like a home. He turned off the engine. The darkness of the garage wrapped around us. There is no us, Elena, he said. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it in my lap. I've already moved my things to the apartment in the city, he said. Sophie is with my mother tonight. I'll be picking her up in the morning to take her to school. I opened the envelope. Divorce papers, custody papers. I'm not fighting you on the house, James said, his voice devoid of emotion. You can keep it. I've prepaid the mortgage for 6 months. It should give you time to find a full-time job. James, please, I sobbed, reaching for his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean into it. He was a statue. I have logs of every hotel visit. Elena, he said softly, every text message, every missed dinner. I have proof of child neglect on the nights you left Sophie with the sitter to be with him. If you try to fight me for custody, I will burn your world down just like I burned his. Do you understand? I looked into his eyes. The warmth was gone. The love was gone. Even the anger was gone. There was only the cold, hard clarity of a man who had balanced the ledger. I loved you, he said. Past tense. I loved you so much that I became boring for you. I became stable for you, and you hated me for it. He opened the car door. James, I screamed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He paused, one foot on the pavement. He looked back at me one last time. I know, he said, but apologies are just appreciation, Elena. They don't restore the value of the asset. He walked away down the driveway, his shoes clicking on the asphalt. He didn't look back. He got into an Uber that was waiting at the curb. He had timed that, too. Of course he had. I sat alone in the car, in the garage of the home I had wanted to escape. James had given me exactly what I thought I wanted. He had given me my freedom. He had removed the boring husband. He had removed the lover. He had removed the routine. I was free. I walked into the empty house. The silence was back. But this time, it wasn't a third presence. It was the only presence. It was a vacuum. I sat on the couch where we used to watch movies. I looked at the dust settling on the coffee table. James's revenge wasn't the bankruptcy of Julian. That was just business. His true revenge was this. He left me alone in the house I had broken, with nothing but the echo of the life I had failed to appreciate, until it was gone. He had one, and all I could do was listen to the silence.